Hello, I'm Lucy Adlington of History Wardrobe. Welcome to this whistle-stop tour of 1940s fashion around the world. I'm going to start in the UK. I'm going to take you to lots of different countries, looking at all original clothes from the 1940s. And of course, there isn't time to visit every country and look at every culture, to look at high fashion and workwear and make and do in between. But if you'd like to find out more, you're in luck. I've written a book about it. It's called Women's Lives and Clothes in World War II, and the subtitle is Ready for Action. Because these are stories of women who, when war broke out, were ready to take part, not only as creatives in the fashion world, but really as women working in volunteer work, every kind of agriculture and industry, women who are joining the services, going into uniform, and those women working covertly as spies and guerrillas. The book itself really richly illustrated, lots of stories, lots of clothes, but today you get a sneak peek into the 1940s wardrobe, and you can see some of these garments close to. So shall we start in Britain? And this is a very smart, very pizzazzy, a little sachet, crepe dress suitable for a dinner date or a very elegant evening out. Very typical wartime style, cut with minimal fabric really, just a little bit of flare on the hem and short sleeves, but still with an embellishment, in this case really nice beading, and then a little kick of fabric at the back to be flirty. I'll tell you more about the hat presently. But of course fashion isn't the whole story with clothes. Clothes are really what we wear to be decent, to keep warm, to show we're part of a group. They're not just worn for personal flair. So I'm going to show you a whole range of things, starting in Britain. And I'm going to start with a bit of silk. Now, don't get ideas. This is not what you expected. A very intriguing bit of textile history. If you can see, it's a silk map. Now, it does fit with clothes history because some people were skilled enough to turn collections of silk maps no longer needed into underwear, and I've even seen a fantastic silk housecoat made of silk maps, which is featured in the book. So this silk map is one of many that were printed up for air crews and also for those on covert operations. The idea is if perhaps you crash land or you're trapped behind enemy lines and need to find a way to friendly territory, you've got a map that doesn't rustle like paper, give the game away. A map that can be folded up really small and hidden away. And this map shows North Africa. And so much has yet to be researched and written about the role of African people and African countries in the war. I've included what I can in the book, particularly stories of fantastic Ethiopian women riding out as generals leading armies against the fascists. Extraordinary stories. But if we start in North Africa, I'll take you to Egypt. And it's in Egypt that you can go shopping in the souk. And here's a pair of sandals bought in Cairo in the 1940s. They look quite modern, don't they? And what I love about shoes is they bear the imprint of the people who've worn them. And I do know the story of these shoes. You can read it in the book. So very simple, everyday objects. But of course, the journey that people take in wartime can be quite extraordinary. Also from Egypt, a souvenir. Now, buying souvenirs when travelling is nothing new, and lots of goods are created for the tourist market. But one thing about war, as well as all the trauma, the destruction, the depredation, the grieving, war also gives people an opportunity to travel, to see countries, to see cultures far different from their own. And this was no different for British people. British service personnel serving abroad, and this might be with entertainment groups or medical units or in combat, they like to go shopping and to buy something from local sellers send back home to family and to sweethearts. If you can see, this leather bag has a very typical tourist image of Egypt. There's the pyramids, palm trees and a camel, and actually some quite beautiful markings on the back showing the more ancient history of hieroglyphs. This was bought by a British chap who was serving in the army, and he sent it home to a lady who he hoped would become his. She, however, had joined the ATS and gone off to see the world in her own way, and alas, the romance didn't blossom as much as the chap would have liked, but she still kept the handbag. So these artefacts remind us of the fact that it was a world war. And yet, in the UK, life goes on as normal and fashion is still part of wartime life. However, high fashion has to adapt, and so we're seeing the different cuts, the different styles that reflect austerity and shortages and the government utility scheme. In London, which has been one of the great fashion capitals of Europe, we have what are known as the top 10 fashion designers, and you may be aware of names such as Digby Morton and Norman Hartnell and Hardy Amies. But the one that really intrigued me when I was writing the book was a woman called Bianca Mosca. Now, Bianca Mosca had worked in Paris as a vendeuse, a seller, for her cousin, Elsa Schiaparelli. So Bianca brought her Italian sense of style to London, mixed it with English flair for tailoring, and she created beautiful clothes. I'm really pleased to have this Bianca Mosca jacket, it's for Jacquemart, in my collection. She was head of the company, of the design there. It's got fabulous feature buttons, but only 3. There is a war on, you know. And then the cut of the pockets, the simple details of what makes this jacket stand out as something really special. The cut on the back as well. So beautiful detailing there, but it seems very simple. It's a classic. So it's lovely to really bring a reader's attention to names such as Bianca Mosca. Got lost in history a little bit, perhaps because she died very young. She died in 1950, untimely. However, British clothes aren't all about high fashion. Let's face it, life goes on as normal, and most of us are more likely to be shopping at, and can you see the label? Perhaps it's a little faded over time. It's Marks and Spencer's. Their brand naming is St. Michael. Quality. Marks and Spencer's knew that they were going to have to cut back on dyes, they were going to have to cut back on fabrics due to shortages, and so they thought, well, let's do what we can to cheer up expectant mothers. Instead of them having to have drab clothes, let's create a range of smocks that have got a bit of fun to them and a bit of colour, and this is one of the smocks. You can see others on display at the Marks and Spencer's archive in Leeds in Yorkshire. So this one links back to our visit to Egypt because it is printed with lotuses and there's an ancient Egyptian figures and hieroglyphs and so on to give you a little sense of what the British people would call exotic. However, it's not just high fashion, daily life that we have to contend with in war. War also means destruction, usually indiscriminate destruction, and so many countries experience the horrors of bombing. Britain was no exception, and the garment I'm going to show you next was actually given out as a charity, if you like, to people who'd survived, a family who'd survived the infamous Coventry bombings in England. Now, there were so many voluntary organisations, I've done a whole chapter on them in the book, who gathered together clothes and bedding and utensils so that people could start again when they'd lost everything. But the lady in Coventry who was given the coat that I'm about to show you, she was a little concerned. She felt it was a bit flamboyant and that there were others who had nothing. So why should she have something that seemed so glamorous? Can you guess? It's a fur coat. Now, the lady who donated it, she'd had it tucked away in storage for so long, and she said to me, "I hope it's all right. I hope the moths haven't got it." And I said, "Not likely." it's fake fur. You might be surprised to know that fake fur is not uncommon in the 1940s. In fact, because of shortages in natural fibres and textiles and difficulties in shipping worldwide, it means that industry is having to be really technologically advanced to come up with alternatives to natural fibres. So we have fake wools. We've already got rayon on the market and different cellulose fabrics. Now, I'd say that fake fur, it's not quite as nice in a sense of style as real fur, and it's certainly not as warm. But if I'd been bombed out, I'd be very glad of a coat to keep me snug. So there is the Coventry bombing coat. Now, England was not alone, the UK was not alone in suffering the traumas of war, of bombing, of shellings. And it's really difficult sometimes when you're writing about clothes to get a sense of how it must be for ordinary people. You know, we tend to think of glamorous 40s fashion, but for ordinary people in the war, although they might want fashion to boost morale, actually clothes can be, I suppose it can be a sense of normality, having things that you're familiar with when it seems as though the whole world is exploding. And there are a lot of traditions that carry on during the war that give people a sense of connection with their roots, with their culture and so on. And this brings me to my next garment. We're heading east, across Europe. I'm actually skipping France and Germany. If you want to read about clothing under the Nazis in Germany, if you want to read about how France copes with occupation, you'll have to read it in the book. But I'm going even further east. I'm heading out to Ukraine and then Russia. Now this is the top part of a long shift of a very typical Russian outfit, and it's got beautiful stitching around the top, and then it's pieced together. Do you know, the styling is very similar to shifts worn in the UK 200 years before. That's what it makes me think of. And it just shows that the traditions of clothing coming down through the generations, through the decades. And this one is decorated with lovely cross stitch in red and black with a rose design. So whoever wore this somehow had to keep a semblance of ordinary life, whether it's raising children, working on the land, working in industry, we don't know anymore. Too often clothes have the stories and we don't know what they are. But I have written more about Russia in the book. You can read about the amazing fighter pilots and bomber crews, including the famous Night Witches bomber crews. You can read about women who are knitting in the ruins of Stalingrad. And just one more reminder of everyday life. This doll from Ukraine is showing those traditions of rural life and communities that were absolutely devastated by invasion, by wanton brutality. It's got a very typical headscarf, the doll, worn by many women in Eastern Europe, and then very simple cotton and linen clothes. So the contrast of high fashion and traditional working clothes. I love this doll. So that's Russia. But let's drop down a bit to the shores of the Mediterranean, not Egypt, further along. We'll go to Jerusalem under the very contentious rule of the British Mandate in Palestine. And this dress was made for a Western woman to wear, you can tell that from how short it is, or one of the new modern styled Palestinian women, the Arab women. And so they had a choice of wearing the more traditional coverings or having Western styled clothing. But the embroidery here, a mixture of silk and metallic threads, was a chance for Palestinian women to show their skill and to show traditional designs. So lots more about life in Palestine for women there in the book. But I really like this dress, very simple black crepe and yet cheered up. I suspect that it's been taken up on the hem because it comes just above the knee, which is a little racy for wartime. All right, let's go even further east and let's go to India next. Now, Britain had long had a very unwelcome, in many cases, presence as part of the empire, a colonial presence. And for Western families living in India, some of them didn't make much effort to understand the culture, they didn't make much effort to appreciate the Indian people who worked for them or who they worked with. And there were others who did make more of an effort. And so for service personnel and medical personnel from Britain going out to India in the war, they were exposed to a totally different culture and totally different clothing, a totally different way of life. And some of them were quite astounded and amazed by what they saw and wanted to share it with people back home. To do this, they went shopping as ever. And the garment I'll show you next from India is made for the tourist market in some ways, a cotton dressing gown with beautiful silk embroidery. And this was bought by a chap serving out in India, and he bought it for his new wife, Anne Abbott. And there are her initials, AA, on the pocket. And what I love about this is that it shows skill in design and colour and technique of the sewer. And unfortunately, we have far fewer stories, far fewer histories from, say, people in India who were making these clothes, weaving the fabric. We tend to get more stories through that colonial filter of those who were able to write about their experiences and find an audience for them. But I do like this as evidence not only of a young husband still in love, but also Anne, who no doubt kept this beautiful dressing gown for special occasions. Really nice. Moving on from India, we head to Singapore. And the dressing gown I'll show you now is featured in the book. And I tell you a lot more about its history. But all you need to know for now is that this was fabric that was chosen by a chap serving out in Singapore called Joe. He was out there with a bunch of chums serving in the military. Again, all the details are in the book. And he thought he would buy this fabric and have it made up as a dressing gown for his sister Anne back in England. So Joe chose the design. The fabric's made of, it's a lovely floral, light blue, almost an aqua blue floral silk, and sent it back to Anne. And back in wartime England, Anne must have thought, you know, she was the bee's knees wearing silk, not rayon, not parachute silk either. Beautiful floral silk. However, Joe's story is a very sad one. Joe was captured along with his whole company, and they were all put to work on the infamous Burma-Siam Railway of Death, as it became known. The death toll was so high, the suffering was so great. And of all of his company, only Joe survived. Joe came back to England horribly, horribly damaged by his experiences. And so the dressing gown is a memory both happy and sad times. I did tell you clothes have stories. The next garment I'll show you does hold memories, and they're more personal memories for me, not my memories. This next garment was made up from fabric in Hong Kong. Now, I have written a lot about the silk industry in Japan and China and Hong Kong and so on in the book, and you'll find out more. The silk was bought by a naval medic called Charlie, and Charlie bought it for his new wife, Margaret, who was serving with the Wrens back in England, or rather she had been. She'd left the Wrens when she got married to start a family. Now, Margaret must have been delighted with the dress that was made from Hong Kong silk. Here it is. What an elegant design. It's very long, lots of fabric. It's got neat detailing and then slightly gathered so it flutes out. Little belt buckle here. It's not my colour, else I'd wear it, but it suited Margaret down to the ground. And Margaret, by the way, is my grandmother. It's one of the few things I have that belong to her. I have her naval jacket and I have her wedding dress, and I have a lovely dress from Hong Kong. So, we've been to India, we've been to Singapore, we've been to Hong Kong. Where do you want to go next? Well, let's go even further east. Let's get to the Pacific and the Philippines. You might have heard of people using wooden-soled shoes during the war because they'd run out of shoe leather. And plus, wood, it's hard wearing. However, these shoes are more goods created for a tourist market. They're made in the Philippines, very typical of the war and post-war years, with palm trees there to make up the heel and a lovely felt front and strap. They're actually quite comfy to wear, but they are really noisy to walk in. And from the Philippines, we'll head up to the islands of Japan. Now, when I was writing the book, I was really intrigued to learn more about Japan and Japanese women during the war, during World War II, particularly because I'd spent a couple of years living in Japan myself, up in the north of the country, and there were certain things that triggered memories for me. And I loved the fabrics in Japan, by the way. So I collected what I could of 1940s fabrics. So here, for example, is a very light fabric, almost with a crepe finish. Lovely lanterns there, paper lanterns. It's kimono fabric, but a light summer kimono or a yukata gown. So we have that, but my favourite Japanese fabrics and my favourite garment from Japan is indigo. And by the way, in the book you'll see lots of photographs and some of them including Japanese fashions. I was lucky enough to be going to a car boot sale, and it was a very rainy day, and there was a box that was getting soggier by the minute, and the box was full of photograph albums from Japan, and they all dated to the 1940s. One of them, and this is how jammy I am, one of them was an album of photographs from a dressmaking school in Tokyo. Wonderful, wonderful to include those. But this is a pair of trousers. And I've written quite a lot about the importance of trousers, not only in Japan but also around the world, for women, having clothes that are fit for purpose. And these trousers are still worn, particularly by some of the older generations working in rice fields in Japan. You see the oba-chans, the grannies, the grandmothers, bent over working the fields as they have done year on year. The fabric is dyed a lovely indigo, and they're called monpei. They fasten at the waist, so you've got a bow there, and then ties on the other side. So it's really one size, fits everybody. And I was also lucky enough to acquire a beautiful book of indigo samples and other Japanese designs, so I put it in the book, and do get in touch if you want to see more of them because they're absolutely exquisite. So we're heading out to Japan, because in 1941, Japan joins the war after the shocking attack on Pearl Harbor. And responding to the attack, of course, the Americans. This brings me to the hat. Do you like it? Are you thinking, when is it going to fall off? Well, it is securely pinned on the back, I hope. And the idea is to wear it at a tilt, at a jaunty angle, to boost morale, rather like having your red lipstick and a nice pair of stockings. The other hats I can show you up here are also designed to be tip tilt, and they're all American. This one looks like it's made out of old school ties, and it's just got real pizzazz to it. I think that would look fantastic with street clothes, with a snappy suit. Then over here, a little more glamorous. This one is decorated with glittering beads and a fantastic felt hat pin to match. And again, tip it forward over rolled up hair. So America, although they have limitations, they don't have rationing in quite the same way as many other countries around the world. The shortages are significant. Another piece of fabric I can show you is very typical cotton print fabric from America. And a lot of times during the Great Depression and during World War II, companies that sold sacks of flour or sacks of animal feed would print the sacks in really bright, attractive colours so that people would then reuse the sacks. You see, it's an incentive to buy that particular brand. I've got an original flour bag here, Shirley's Supreme Flour. So the label can be removed, and then this lovely attractive pattern, it can be unstitched and pieced together into a larger garment. So that's an example of thrift in wartime and of shortages, and it speaks of poverty as well, doesn't it? However, America also brings a lot of money into the war and a lot of confidence. So the next dress I'll show you speaks of that. A fantastic crepe dress. Now, I don't think putting it just on a mannequin does it justice, but you're to imagine it on a flesh and blood person with these lovely bows at the front and shoulder pads here that you could land a B-52 on. I've teamed it up with a smart belt, and accessorising is one way of jazzing up your outfits in war. Although it doesn't have a lot of fabric, like many wartime dresses, it's got that little flirty flick at the bottom and very typically a side fastening. This one's got a zip, known in Britain as a lightning fastener a lot of the time. And in Britain, when zips are in short supply, can't get hold of them, you're more likely to have press studs up the side. And this one actually does without press studs, it just has covered buttons. So a very, very confident outfit there, and a very pleasant one. I think it's fantastic. And yet, with America entering the war, we've got a lot more resources for the Allies to fight against the Nazis in Europe. And so, travelling up from Egypt, where we were before, we're going to go up across the Mediterranean and into Italy. And I loved writing about how Italian women resisted fascism and how they used clothes not only for a sense of fashionable flair, but also in their work as couriers and as guerrilla fighters as well. And you'll read more about guerrilla fighters in Greece, in fact around Europe. Fantastic stories. But the Italian garment I'm going to show you comes from a bit of a shopping spree in Rome. A chap called Ernest was a sapper with Montgomery's 8th Army, and he travelled from North Africa, hopped onto Sicily and then into Italy, pushed their way up through past Cassino, terrific, awful fighting at Cassino, and then made it to Rome. And here he thought he would buy a present for his wife-to-be. It's quite unusual and surprisingly stylish. Might not be what you're expecting. It's a raincoat. Now, what makes this extraordinary is the fabric it's made from. Well, I say fabric, it's clearly chemical. It's a very early form of plastic. You'll see it is transparent. It comes with its own hood and belt. It is featured in the book. Has lovely stitching on it, and it's another example of how textiles become incredibly innovative during the war. We're having to find substitutes for traditional fabrics that I've spoken before, and so instead of macintoshed fabric or traditional rubbers, we've got new plastics being used. Of course, plastic is going to be the wonder fabric with our nylons and brinylons and crimpaloons of the post-war years. So I really love this raincoat, and I think it's extraordinary how it's survived in such excellent condition for so long. So that's Italy. But the Allies are pushing ahead. Well, obviously the Russians are coming from the east, the Allies pushing up through Italy, as I've said, and also from 1944 coming into Europe after the D-Day landings. And this brings me to a very sumptuous garment. It belongs to a lady called Wyneth, who was in the ATS. I have her ATS uniform, very smart. And Wyneth joined up as a young teenager. Well, an old teenager, young woman, yeah. And she travelled from Yorkshire and ended up in Europe. She was part of Montgomery's GCHQ, and it was in Belgium that she somehow, and I never found out when I was interviewing, never quite found out how, acquired a bolt of lush burgundy velvet fabric. And she was very lucky to find this fabric because the Nazis were notorious for plunder and used to strip shops, particularly Jewish shops. They not only stole the shop contents, but also the livelihoods, the businesses from Jewish people before deporting them. So a very sombre aspect to occupation there. But Winifred got hold of this fabric and she had it made up into a beautiful evening gown, perhaps just the thing for celebrating victory in Europe in 1945. When the gown was becoming a little tired, a little out of date, the fabric was reworked into an evening cape. And here is Wineth's Belgian velvet with a fresh lining and collar and clasp on there to keep you snug when you're going out for a dinner dance, perhaps. That brings me back to Japan. And the war is not over. In May 1945, victory in Europe. I'll show you one more garment. Here we are. Oh, there goes the head. This fabric is really intriguing. If you can you see the design is actually the atomic symbol. So it's from atomic physics, which, given the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombings in 1945 in August, that seems quite a dark motif, doesn't it? And yet, science looks forward too. And this garment for me shows the real importance of an attempt at unity and peace after the war. From being deadly enemies, truly antagonistic, this garment links the USA and Japan. So the fabric is Japanese, light kimono, cotton kimono fabric. It's just beautiful condition. And yet it was made up into a dressing gown by an American woman to give to her husband. So as I say, it shows that unity between enemies. Now, the end of the war does not bring the end of the war. And I was able in the book to look at what happens afterwards. How do you pick up the pieces when your life has been devastated, when perhaps your home, your land, your crops have been destroyed, your business? How do you adjust when perhaps during the war you've been able to travel the world, and even as a woman you've been able to have independence and you've been able to have experiences that perhaps would never have been open to you? How do you adjust to going back home, to starting again with all the experiences you've had? Well, whatever the story of women in wartime, it's these mementos, these things they're left behind, that tell that story. And I'll tell you one last time, if you'd like to know more, you can read Women's Lives and Clothes in World War II. But for now, I'll pop that there. I have finished my whistle-stop tour. I could talk for ages, explore the stories for ages, because really it's not just about the cottons and the silks and the rayons and the plastic. It's the people that wear the clothes that carry the history for us. So I hope you enjoyed 1940s fashion around the world. I'm Lucy Adlington of History Wardrobe. Cheerio.